Okay. Today I am talking about January and my wrap up for that month. So just as a little bit of a refresh, the books that I wanted to finish this month were Grit, Extreme Ownership, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Grey, The Rose Society, Broken People, and Unwind. So here I have the 5 physical books, and then we'll talk about the audiobooks and ebooks that I read this month. The very first book that I finished, finally, is Broken People by Sam Lansky. So this was a total of 289 pages. Finished it January 5th, and I gave it a 3.5 star review. This one is about open soul surgery and basically like therapy. I started this book back in August. Yeah, so I said that it's very difficult to get into unless you're like in the mood for almost a fictionalized book that reads like a therapy session or reads very textbooky. It also handles a lot of issues. It handles suicidal ideation, internalized homophobia, gaslighting, shame around drug use and abuse, very dramatic relationships, and there's also quite a bit of body dysmorphia and just like self-loathing in it. Probably won't read it again. It was just very long. By about chapter 5, which is on page 69, so like this much of the book left, okay? I ended up finding it on Libby and just listened to the audiobook. And that's just where I'm kind of at. Yeah, we follow Sam, who's the main character, through his spiritual journey as he becomes like kind of like a better version of himself. By the end though, Sam has learned the art of self-love and no longer wants to get HIV or AIDS, which is a very big triggering kind of theme throughout the book, that he at some point wants to get diagnosed with this illness. He becomes a much more tolerable character. That's another thing, is he is quite an unlikable protagonist, and that is something that I struggle with just in general, like if I'm not enjoying reading it from your perspective. And I even wrote here, he becomes a much more tolerable character to follow and no longer makes me want to jab my eyes out. Probably won't read again, and I probably will remove it from my shelf. I don't know if I'd recommend it to a friend. The next book that I finished on this list was Grit by Angela Duckworth. I finished this on January 10th, so 4 days ago. It was a total of 277 pages, according to Goodreads, and I gave it a 3.5 stars. I started this back on November 13th. And the reason that it took me so long to finish it is I wasn't prioritizing it. I had other books that I enjoyed more, and while this one had interesting aspects such as the psychology behind grit and what makes somebody gritty, and that you can grow grit and you don't need to be the super gritty kid at birth, like you can grow it, you can learn it, you can develop it. It's not something that's set in stone. I just wasn't prioritizing it. By the end of it, I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to I'm probably going to continue not prioritizing this one. And I ended up getting the audiobook as well on Libby and listening to that, just because the chapters in here are they can be so long. So what I had to say about this, reading directly from my notes, was it's very obviously scientific. Was a little bit disappointed that it seemed a little bit longer than would have been necessary for a 277 page book. I think that if she chopped off that 77 pages, that would have been great. She used a lot of the same studies and referred back to the same studies multiple times to kind of like make that point known, and I just thought that that was a little bit unnecessary. I did enjoy the interviews and the dialogue back and forth. I understood probably by like the second chapter what grit was And I think that that's my main issue with a lot of nonfiction books, is that they will hammer it home. They'll keep reiterating the same thing. And I'm very much the kind of reader where, like, you tell me once and I get it. You tell me twice, okay. But by the third, fourth, fifth, seventh, 10th times that you're telling me this, I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed. And that's just kind of like where I was. I would recommend this to a friend. I think if you struggle with getting out of the bed in the morning, probably won't read it again, but you never know, and this one will be staying on my shelves. Later on in the month, I ended up finishing The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I finished this one in the wee hours of this morning, but I put yesterday. Total of 439 pages. And I am ruthless with this one and gave it 2 stars. In my defense, this one started off as what could have been a 3.5, 4-star read. It started off very enjoyable, kind of. It's broken up into 3 parts. So first there's like the reaping, getting into the Hunger Games, that kind of thing. The second part is following the Hunger Games, and the third part is following President Snow directly after the Hunger Games up into the point where he starts university. I struggle with this one because the first third was boring and held no value to it, I thought, as the reader. Obscenely long, could have been done in like 25 pages, okay? The second part was amazing. The second part could have just been the book. If you just started and stopped there, perfect, seamless, loved it. Probably would have given it like 4 stars. Like, that's impressive. And then the second, or the third, so like the last third, didn't need to happen. Yeah, I just, meh. Okay, so we're following President Snow in this book, and it's the 10th annual Hunger Games, and we come to find out that his dean of his school, he's a 17-year-old and this is happening, is the creator of the Hunger Games along with his dad. And so for the first time ever, they're gonna have people kind of coaching the kids throughout the Hunger Games, and President Snow is awarded Lucy Gray, who is from District 12, and she claims that she's not actually District. She is Covey, which are basically these musical artists that before the war would travel around and perform. He ends up falling in love with her, or so he claims, and then he ends up killing a bunch of people, and in the end, Lucy Gray dies, I think. It's just kind of a mess. Like, the last 50-ish pages, it did not end in a satisfactory way, I found. There's at no point is this evil of President Snow that we know and hate ever given like an actual villain story. Like, it's just, he grew up poor, he was supposed to be super rich, he went to school, he lost his scholarship because he broke the rules. Oh no, he ended up becoming a peacekeeper. Cool, he was really good at it. Oh my god, he did the test. He could have become a commander. Instead, everything worked out in the end, and he is a despicable person who ends up killing his father's ex-best friend. I think if we followed the Dean Highbottom, is that his name? I don't know. The Dean's perspective would have been great. Some characters would have been far more interesting, I think, to follow around, particularly like the Dean, or even the game maker, Dr. Ghoul would have been really interesting. First third was rather boring. Lots of info there that just seemed placed there just to up the page count. Second third covering Lucy Gray and the actual 10th Hunger Games. Last third didn't need to happen. At no point is Corio or President Snow gradually becoming a bad guy. A switch just randomly flipped out of nowhere. Far too long. Would probably be better as a 200-pager. Or from Dean Highbottom's POV. Ending wasn't satisfactory. At around page 350, rating went from a 3.5 or 4 to a 2. Will not read again. Disappointing. Wouldn't recommend. And then I ended up reading Unwind by Neil Shusterman. This was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. The world building, very great. Classic dystopian, like makes you have chills, and just like it really made me question humanity. And I think because of that I really ended up enjoying it. I felt attached to particularly Risa and Connor as the two primary characters. There are a few extra ones that are more primary characters as well, but those ones I felt most connected to, and just watching their relationship develop. And it's not even like a romantic relationship in the beginning, was very beautiful. First 5-star read of the year, and thank God. I was losing hope. I hadn't even hit a 4-star yet. So from my notes here in the journal, I said, oh my God, where to begin? Concepts in here are fantastic. We have things such as the Bill of Life and the Unwinding in particular. We follow a kid who's actually getting unwound in one of the chapters, and it's bone chilling. It leaves you pretty speechless. If you're one of those readers that cries when reading, it might make you cry. I am not one of those readers, unfortunately. I'm a very emotional person, but not when it comes to reading. I don't know why, like, unless I'm visually seeing it, or if there's sad music playing, then I might. Every little detail that is brought up is brought up for a reason. I find that with a lot of books, they'll like throw in all these little minuscule details and you're like, wow, I can't wait to figure out like why this is so important, and then they never touch on it again. Not with this book. It left me pretty speechless. I would definitely recommend this to pretty much anybody, especially if you're just looking for like a good dystopian world and you're just looking for something kind of different to kind of get your gears turning. And yeah, I am already on to the next book. It's a 5-book series, so I'm gonna just like continue following the book. I'll probably reread it again at some point, and I think that this might, if all the other books follow the same flow and the same, not like way of writing or anything, but if it ends up all being 5 stars, this definitely is up there with my favorite series ever. So yes, amazing, 10 out of 10 recommend. The next book that I read, I listened to the audiobook, but I have the physical copy right here, is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. On audiobook. So I downloaded it on Libby, borrowed it. It was 224 pages if you read it physically. I gave it a 3-star. It wasn't great, wasn't bad. He uses the word fuck a lot, and there's just like a lot of random information that he seemingly puts in there just to make it seem more like an autobiography almost. And it's just all about him, which is fine because like it's his novel. It was definitely interesting from the point of like having anxiety. I think I took a lot of things away of like just not really caring as much, or only caring about the certain things. I thought it was a little bit longer than it needed to be. I think it could have been brought down by about 75 pages. Around the 150 page mark would have been perfect, because then you would have gotten rid of a lot of the fluff and unnecessary things. I would recommend for people to read it. Knowing that I have the physical copy at home, it will stay on my bookshelves for the future. My boyfriend read it, I've read it, lots of my family members have read it, and I think it's just like a good one to like start a conversation. Next, we have an audiobook, and I don't think I filmed a clip for this one, so we're just gonna get kind of into it, and that is Everything's Fucked by Mark Manson, a book about hope. And that one follows up on The Subtle Art, so it's kind of like a sequel, I guess you could say. And this one in particular I listened to on Libby. I thought it was a much better book than Subtle Art. I ended up giving it a 4-star rating. It was 288 pages. I ended up listening to it on January 21st. I thought it was a really interesting novel, definitely better than Subtle Art. Had an interesting take on religion and just hope in general, like what is hope, that kind of thing. I really enjoyed his talking on the emotional versus the logical brain, something that everybody has, but very few people actually talk about, I think. And there wasn't as much fluff as Subtle Art had, which was, thank God. And it wasn't a lot of anecdotes that were just like him telling his story. It was anecdotes that actually mattered to the story. So that was nice. Yeah, I would highly recommend this book as a read, and I might end up rereading it in the future. The next book that I finished was Unstrung by Neil Shusterman. This is book 1.5 of the Unwind series. It was a total of 60 pages, and I gave it a 3-star rating. I read it in one night on January 26th, and I borrowed it on Libby. I liked it. The only reason that I read it was because I found it on Libby when I was trying to find the other books while we were in the hotel. It filled in a lot of gaps of what happened to Lev to bring him to the graveyard, which was really awesome. And it touched a lot on like the First Nations and how they're kind of separated from this whole like bill of life. That each person chooses like a spirit animal, and then those are the only animals that you can actually receive parts from. So it was very interesting on that, and then you get to see the parts pirates that break in and steal these kids because their body parts go for a lot. And yeah, I liked how it gave more information on why Liv became a clapper, because it just kind of happens out of nowhere. He just kind of shows up, and it's like, where was he? Like, you get a little bit of the information, but then how did he get here, and why is he suddenly like having all these thoughts? I would recommend, if you are reading the series, to read it at some point, because it did add a lot to the series. It was still very well written. It was a little bit too short though, for my liking. So those are my opinions on that. The next book is The Young Elites. So this is book 1 in the Young Elites trilogy, which is The Rose Society. It is by Mary Lou. I finished it January 30th. It was a total of 355 pages, and I gave it 5 stars. So this book was incredible. I don't even know where to start with it. That's how much I wrote about it. So I'm just gonna kind of read what I wrote. In this world, there are those who survived the blood fever as children, which was an illness that was going around at the time that the book was written. And as a result, a lot of the kids who survived have markings. So I think of this as like scarring on their faces, that kind of thing. Totally unsure if I'm right or wrong in that. Some of these people that have been marked also have these additional powers. So they are called the Young Elites. So we cover Adelina in this story as our protagonist, and she takes us through her discovering her powers, her killing her father, that kind of thing. And at her burning, she is saved from the stake by the Young Elites, who call themselves the Daggers. And so they're a secret society of young adults who have these incredible powers. They've been kind of followed through life to come up in this society and hopefully take down the empire. So Adelina falls in love with Enzo, who is the leader of the Daggers, and he also happens to be the prince. He is trying to overthrow the queen, which is his sister. We watch as Adelina slowly loses herself to her powers and the darkness that's inside of her as she kind of loses control of that. And then it all comes to a boiling point when Adelina has a significant hand in the death of Enzo. I am so excited to read the rest of the series. I stayed up all night. I finished this book at 10 o'clock in the morning on January 30th. I didn't go to sleep. But it was incredible, and I would love to find like a physical copy of this series just to have. And it would make an incredible movie or TV series or something like that, because some of the training elements and just the magic system behind this world is very interesting, and yes, I love it. I cannot wait to finish the rest of the series. The next book that I read was Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer. I listened to this on audiobook. I listened to it on January 31st, and it was a total of 304 pages for a 3-star rating. It was okay, it was fine. That's what my 3 stars represent. Like, the book is fine. I didn't dislike it, I didn't love it, I didn't like it. It was meh. It was a little bit longer than it actually needed to be. I won't be purchasing or really reading it again, I don't think. And all that it really covered was like being aware of what triggers your anxiety and having a roadmap on how to handle it. So it was interesting, the psychology behind anxiety and acknowledging like step by step how to deal with it. But yeah. If you do have anxiety, however, or you know a loved one who struggles with anxiety as I do, I would recommend that you either listen to it or read it or whatever. Next up, we have Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And this one was incredible. I physically read it and I also listened to it alongside. So yeah, it was really nice. I love this book. I read it, well, finished it on the 31st. It was 320 pages and I gave it a 5-star rating. So we are following the ongoing battles in Iraq and what goes on with bringing particularly American soldiers home in one piece. There's a lot of great info in here. I personally love war stories and that kind of thing, and that's why I think I gave it such a high rating. But it also applied to life. So it brings up a lot of stories of what happened while they were overseas, but it also brings that, like, how they learned things from those situations into real life. So taking extreme ownership over giving out commands that might end up getting somebody hurt. In real life, you need to take extreme ownership over doing the wrong thing that might end up costing your company billions of dollars. That kind of thing. I would recommend everybody reads this. I will probably reread this maybe every year. And yeah, all in all, it was a great book. So let's summarize for the month. I read a total of 10 books. My goal was 7 books. I ended up reading 10. 3 out of those 10 were 5-star reads. In total, I read 2,891 pages for an average of 289 pages per book. My favorite book was The Young Elites, and my least favorite book was Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. In total, I listened to 3 audiobooks. I read 4, 5, well, technically I read 4 physical books, and I read 3 audiobooks. My average star count was 3.7, and 5 out of the 7 TBR got read. The only reason I did not get to gray was because I was prioritizing other books, obviously. I read a lot that were not on the list. 5 of the books that I read were not on the list, so that kind of makes sense. And then as far as the Rose Society, I just didn't get to it because I didn't realize it was part of a series. So I read the first book, and now I think I will read the Rose Society in the upcoming month. So yes, that is my reading for the month of January. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed filming it. I need to start filming during the day. I started getting ready at like 2 o'clock, and somehow it's already 6. And I just started filming this video like 15 minutes ago. So there's that. But yeah, let me know what your favorite book was in the month of January, and I will talk to you later. Bye!